Hello, kia ora, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of The Process, where we aim to inspire and encourage our listeners through conversations driven by the beautiful game, but modeled through and by the process. So kick back, grab something cold or warm to drink, and enjoy.
This is football with New Zealand's finest. You wouldn't believe the stories I've heard from that club. One of one. Sometimes the best just doesn't cut it. The process.
So I'd like to welcome in my boy Sean Morris, he's with us from Mercer Island, outside of Seattle, Washington, the grand old US of A. Welcome, Sean.
Good to be here.
Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you. Good. Happy to be here. Happy to spend a day with you.
Yeah, it's been a while. We stay in regular contact, normally through texts, but it's been a while, I think, since we'd seen each other face to face and had a voice conversation. So this would be fun. But you don't look too different. Still look the same as if you had a game this afternoon. Training, playing. Are you still playing a little bit?
Yeah. Do kind of once or twice a week, still playing the open age, just playing with the young boys, chasing them around. So, keeping active. And I've trained with the Sounder second team off and on here and there over the last year. That's toned down a little bit, but trying to keep active and keep in the game wherever I can as I'm cracking nearer and nearer to 40.
Age is just a number. That's definitely something that rings in my ears with you, is specifically, I would describe you, a football junkie. But you would always say, I'm going to play, till the wheels fall off. I'm going to play as long as I can, regardless, I think, of the level, which you squeeze and stretch the level. But yeah, I think you always said that you're going to try and play as long as you can.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of have two approaches to it these days. It's one, I want to do it because I want to be healthy and because I can and I like it. But then there comes a point and said, if this isn't fun anymore and I'm really not enjoying it and it's become sort of a negative thing in my life, then that becomes something to think about. But yeah, I mean, that hasn't happened yet. I still love playing, getting out there, running around, doing it. And every chance I get, I enjoy.
I was going to say, you obviously love or still enjoy it. So good on you, Sean. Good on you. Yeah, let's get into a bit of your process, your journey in the game. Like I said in the past, we only have studs on this in these conversations, football studs in these conversations. So yeah, I want to hear about kind of where the game started with you. Yeah, where that bug bit you.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much been my entire life. I grew up in a footballing family. I have two older siblings, and my dad coached us. And so, I mean, it was since I could walk, there was a ball there, and I mean, it was from day one, all we really did and all I really wanted to do. And then, so I grew up just playing, local. I grew up around here in the just north of Seattle, about 30 minutes north of Seattle, in a town called Bothell. Just grew up playing locally there, and then ended up joining Crossfire when I was 9. And that was just where it really kind of started kicking off for me, of being like, I'm dedicated into this. I've made a team. I've gone through my tryouts, and that was my first real introduction to being like, this is kind of a lifestyle now. It's not just something that we do and it's kind of a fun thing, but it's more of, I really want to do this. And I remember being in, kindergarten, first grade, telling people, when I'm 18, I want to go to Europe and I want to go play over there. And I was telling people that from a real young age. So it took me a little longer than 18 to get there, but I did end up getting there, which I'm, pretty happy about. I think young me would have been pretty satisfied with that.
Common theme or common, a theme I would say is starting to ring true in a couple of these conversations we had so far is the older siblings, and then the I guess the father figure that kind of helped kickstart or foster that love of the game a little bit, so that your older brother Mike, able to chase him a bit, so that's somebody to look up to that might be playing at, obviously they're older than you, so they're probably playing at a bit of a higher level, might be able to get around a group of him and his friends, which can help push you a bit, and then help having that kind of that parental figure, if you will, that helps foster a bit of that, with resources and whatnot. So that seems to be a bit of a common theme, having some of that support system around you that helps foster that love, especially when you're young, obviously just getting started in the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's been this kind of probably the biggest thing for me is just how naturally occurring it was. It wasn't something that we had to manufacture and had to really structuralize or anything like that. There was a field behind our house and we just go play. And it was fun. It was a thing we did as a family. I did it with my dad and my brother and my sister, and we go out there. And it was that of I was the youngest. My brother's 4 years older, my sister's 2 years older. So it was a whole lot of like, hey, I'm chasing, bigger, stronger, faster, better people all the time, and I'm just out here battling and trying to find my way in it. But in a really fun, environment where we just enjoyed doing it. We like to go over there and we'd spend hours, over on that field, and I mean, so that's when I say it was really natural, really organic, and just something that, you know, it didn't need to be crafted and built into a system. We just did it because we wanted to.
So then that would push you into some sort of organized club structure as a youth in some regard. Was that something that brother was playing in and you kind of just followed in his footsteps from that standpoint? How did that process go?
Yeah, I mean, it was again for me. It was there was never really a debate around it, because I was the younger one and the other two were already doing it. My brother started at a local club, East Side, who I am actually involved with now as well, and then moved to Crossfire. My sister played at Crossfire, and then so that was a pretty natural progression for me to just be like, "That's what I'm doing. I'm gonna go try out there," and then I hit 8, 9 years old, and I was just playing, local rec, and that's what was available. And I kind of just felt like, the ceiling was already reached with that. I wanted more. And, so went and tried out a year up, played U11 when I was 9, made that top team. And that really, set everything in motion from there of just, met a few key people. And then it kind of just got my youth career off and rolling, and never really looked back. But like I said, it was never anything up for debate for me. It was always just kind of, oh, this is what I'm going to do.
You mentioned Crossfire. I think one of our former conversationalists, Charlie, I think Charlie Elstrom was also at Crossfire. That's kind of one of the clubs that he came up through. So yeah, and then you mentioned Eastside as well. Again, if you're the club, understanding in the states and whatnot, those are they're not professional clubs per se, as in like under professional umbrellas, as if the Sounders, but they're very well established clubs. And then obviously Crossfire being in the developmental system. Yeah, did that then, so you're going through those, and then obviously I think you ended up at the Sounders in some capacity in their academy setup. Is that right?
No, I'm
No,
too old.
too old for that. That wasn't established at that point in time.
No, they did it, oh, probably, I think 2 years, because it was, yeah, 2 years after I hit college. Because 2009 being that first MLS year, then it was that year or the year after that they established their academy per the MLS, regulation. So I was already in college when that began.
So then walk me back towards okay, so I'm at Crossfire, and is that what helps then get me looked at for college? Is that kind of the track that I'm on to get me, yeah, to get me to school?
It would have been until had a point where coach kind of stopped believing in me, and so sat on the bench for a year and decided I had to make a change because I said I don't want this to be where my career finishes. I don't want to be done playing this game at a high level at the age of 14. I just that didn't feel in line with my life and what I had envisioned for my goals. So I actually moved to Emerald City, which is another club around here. At the time was probably considered not as on the same plane as a Crossfire competitively, but we assembled a group, and that's actually where I got to know Brian Schmetzer, who's obviously now the coach of the Sounders. I played with his son. We went to high school together, but we just built a group there that was kind of, like myself, a whole core of real late bloomers. And so we just built a really nice core group of players that got on really well, played well together, and then became a really strong group, ending up becoming one of the top teams in the country, winning state each year, winning regionals, going and doing that thing all collectively together. And then an entire team of players who all, committed to Division I schools. And that really was, that decision to move made a huge difference for me because it allowed me to have a career. And so it's, I always look back and thank Brian for that opportunity because I wasn't being believed in at the place I was at, and he gave me that trust and that opportunity, and I mean it shaped the rest of my life.
Oh, that's beautiful to hear. So, okay, Crossfire would have been a bit more of an established club, but they're not looking at me the way I see myself, or I'm not being presented opportunities that, I feel I should be warranted, and I'm not given the time. So I almost in a bit take a step back by going toward to Emerald, but that then presents the opportunity from a playing standpoint. Like you said, you recruited some other players, close friends, so a close knit group, but might not be on the level per se that like a Crossfire is, if you will, or that people are looking at that club as gold star. But Emerald provides me the opportunity I need from a playing standpoint, again from a belief standpoint, gives me confidence, and that then so the up and the down to bring me back up again. That's what it sounds like. The move that you made there.
Yeah, I mean, there was, at the time when I moved, it was, I was at Crossfire where we were, winning state championships, winning every tournament we played in. I mean, we were the gold standard of the state at that point in time in our age group. We had won regionals, we'd gone to nationals, and so it's like, we were really, really up there in terms of the quality and capacity of team that we had. Whereas Emerald City was nowhere near that. I mean, there was a lot of guys on that team who said they'd never won a single youth tournament in their whole life. And so there was a real difference in terms of the mentality and the mindset, and just the overall ethos of the club was really different. And Crossfire is built to win. That is what they're designed to do. They're built to say, you come here because you want to win. And that is what it's built for. And that works really well for a lot of people. Sometimes there can be differences in how that gets achieved. And it means that sometimes you end up on the chopping block. And that's not a criticism of that club by any means. They have their ethos and people buy into it, and they've been really, really successful for it. Whereas Emerald City, I think it fit more of, we want to develop people, we want to develop players, and we're going to take a little bit more of a longer approach to this, and we're not going to make some of those sacrifices at the human level in order to go and chase those results. And that was something that suited me much better as a real physical late bloomer, not being a towering figure as I stand now. But I was, very small, very lightweight, hit puberty very late compared to everybody else. And so, that side of the game I struggled with for a number of years, and that set me back at a place like Crossfire, which was very much, win now, we're big, we're powerful, and we're going to go and chase results. Emerald City bought into a little more like, we see something else. And, Brian was really good at drawing that out of players. And, we built that mindset over time, and the right people kind of came at the right times, and we kind of coalesced this really special group that did some amazing things together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's everything in a nutshell right there. Is like, yeah, everybody's developing at different, different speeds, different. Um, you're going to hit it earlier than somebody else is going to hit it. So yeah, it's finding that right place that's going to give you again that time, if that's what you need at that time, where you feel a little bit more comfortable, and the confidence again is there to help you develop on a regular basis, and that's hard to find, especially if you're at a club that's winning. So that's taking some introspection on your individual part, again understanding through the young age that you were, I love, this is something I love to do, this is something I want to do. Okay, where's the best place now from an environment standpoint that's going to help me develop into the best player that I can possibly be? So yeah, I mean that's everything. That's huge. And then to go from a club that's winning everything, because it's easy to stay somewhere where you're winning, to take a step to say, well, I'm gonna look at something different because this might potentially be the best thing for me. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I probably stayed too long because of that difficulty. And I think it's become, kids feel a lot more empowered now that I've returned back here. I think they feel a lot more empowered to kind of move, and maybe it's swung a little too hard the other way, but it's, kids need to be able to pick, and they need to feel freedom and not feel hemmed in. But, at that time, club hopping was a pretty big deal. For a while, I think it felt as admitting I'd failed. And, when you're a young kid, that's a hard thing. You're 13, 14 years old, you have this image of yourself, and I'd had this image of being like, I'm a good player, I play on a good team, like this is a big part of my identity. And to basically admit that I failed and I couldn't be at this place that was the best was a really difficult thing. So it was, I probably stayed several months longer than, I sat on the bench for about 16 months before I decided I'd had enough.
Who helps you with a decision like that? Is that, I mean, because again, you're 13, 14. That's a tough decision to make at that age on your own. But then to talk to somebody at that age is difficult too. Who's helping you with a decision like that? Or is that something that you just on your own decided that that's what you wanted to do?
Um, it ended up becoming mostly driven by me. I mean, it got to the point where I could, there was a very personally targeted incident at a tournament that happened where I just, it really just kind of hit home for me of like, this is not the place I need to be. Like, this is not a person I want to play for. And it just didn't work anymore. And it'd
Mhm.
been coming. I'd been feeling disconnected from that group for a bit, and obviously it's hard when you're sitting on the bench and you will be looked at differently when you're not a key part of the team. When you're a bench player and you play 4 minutes every 3 months, is like people aren't taking you seriously at training, and they're not taking you seriously, as a real member of the team. And socially, that has an impact. Um, and then, I went and guest played for Emerald City a couple times at my parents' encouragement, just to be around Brian and this team. They said, "Hey, this team's kind of doing something. They're starting to come along, and this could be something interesting." And Brian had seen me play and had knew my situation of what I was going through, and just offered out of like, "Hey, we'd love to have him come here." Um, and so it was a little bit there, and so I, tested the waters a little bit, seen kind of a different way of doing things, and then after the, this kind of one, there's a real, you can't always tie it back to one moment, but I can tie it back to one real exact moment that's probably going to live long in my memory of just being like, yeah, this is done. I am not doing this anymore. And I mean, I walked out mid game, in a tournament final because I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And my parents went with me. I told them what happened, and they said, we're making the phone call right now. And I mean, we were up in Bellingham, and it was about an hour drive back to, back home from there. And before we got home, I was, the changes had been made. I had communicated, I'm done here and I'm going there.
Yeah, that's that at that age, that's got to be tough to make that decision. But again, if that's something that you feel is the best thing for yourself, um, yeah, that's what's got to be done. But yeah, those are difficult decisions, and that's something that I tried to discuss is like where they're obviously your parents, you want to have them help you with a decision like that or help you with conversations like that. But from a mentorship standpoint, coaches, you want to try and attach yourself to a coach that you're comfortable talking to, that can help you with tough decisions like that. So yeah, so you make that move. Obviously, that helps kickstart your development. You guys have a lot of success there. Are there tournaments that you go to that help to start you get identified? Are there people that start knocking on your door a little bit when you start to get that 16, 17 age ish when I guess when college starts to become a bit more of a reality for you?
Yeah, I mean, it started with us just being like, we got to get a feeling for winning. That was the thing that we started as we got to, 15, 16, 17, is like, we got to win things to get on people's radar. Like, people chase winners. And, whether that's right, the best thing or not, the reality is like, if you're making waves, winning tournaments and doing well, people are going to be paying attention to you. So we really set out to make sure we were doing that. And then, back then, we were going to Surf Cup. We were going to Nomads. We went down to like Score at the Shore in Florida. Um, and then locally, we would have like a showcase tournament that college coaches would show up to every spring, down in like the Federal Way, Tacoma area. And so, we were just doing kind of these real key showcase level tournaments, just where college coaches are going to be, they're going to be congregating, they're going to be looking at people, they're going to be trying to spot people because they know that's where the talent is. That's where the top teams in the countries. And then obviously, when you go and win a state championship and you're going to regionals at those ages, everybody's looking. So you're getting put on the pedestal in an event like that where everyone's paying attention to what you're doing. So I would say it was a combination of those things of one, seeking that success on the field, finding those key tournaments where we're being showcased so that people are spotting you kind of regardless of what the result is. And then having that, league success and state level success to then go to the regional tournaments where, everybody's really coming and looking at who's there.
So in talking again to some former guests, Charlie Ostrom and Lucas Meek, they were on, and being from that Seattle area, but they're a few years younger than us. And the process that they went through, because the development caddy was in flux at that time, or when they were coming up. So there were a little bit different identifiers for them, and just the process that they went through. But then you'd been a little bit closer to how I think my identifiers were, where it was through kind of state and then regional and then national, or you go to these specific tournaments where you knew certain coaches were going to be at, or a lot of coaches, and those are, I think, the identifiers that I think through our stages, and it's just evolved. But I think my point is, like, through the evolution or through the differences, it's always like, yeah, how you hit it there, like, how is your team doing from a success standpoint, because they want to look at a team that's winning games or getting far in tournaments or doing well on the regional level, and then what do you look like on the day? What's your performance look like on the day? What's your work ethic look like on the day? And those are things that are going to get you noticed, and then ultimately recruited for the next level. So so you found tournaments, Serve Cup, huge tournament, Nomads, huge tournament, and you get looked at from that standpoint. But I know you ended up at school in and around that Seattle area, or specifically at Seattle U. How did that end up evolving? How did that turn about? And what ages would that have been in and around?
I mean, that was a little, again, kind of a connection to where moving to Emerald City had worked out for me, because Pete Fewing, who was the longtime coach at Seattle U, was also, to some degree involved with Emerald City. His kids played there, and so there was some connection there. And he was always paying attention to, any kids who are local, who are good. And Pete's a top guy and an excellent recruiter, and just, if you know him, I mean, he's a people person. He's a networker, and he knows everybody, and he's got great relationships with everyone. And he's just I got tons of love for Pete. He's fantastic. And so he got kind of
Legend.
that ball started. True.
Legend.
So I would say he got that ball started for me, of just being like, Seattle U's on my radar. And then he had, a year before, I was really at that crunch time. He left due to some strife with the athletic director at the school, and then they brought in a new head coach. And so, for a bit, I was like, oh, I think, Seattle is off my radar. I don't really want to do that because I don't know this new coach. And then it was actually Brian, came and talked to me, and he's like, I think, it probably is still the right fit for you. In advising, and because I was looking at a couple other places, and I was looking at, I think I had an offer to go to Princeton, I'd offer at Stanford, I'd offer at St. Mary's, I had one at UC Davis, and then I had at Seattle Pacific, and then at Seattle U. And so, I had a kind of a multitude of offerings, and at Cal Poly, SLO was another one that was chasing for a while. So it was just kind of considering those options, and then it became, looking at, like, what's important to me. Do I want to do, the out of state thing? Do I want to, what do I value? And, and kind of assessing everything and going through that whole recruiting process of just seeing, what's the team like? What's the makeup like? What's the school like? What's the area? Where am I going to be? At that stage in my life, I felt it made more sense for me to stay closer to home. I think I could have done fine going somewhere, but, having seen how it took me a little bit to be ready to do something like that, I think it was a good idea to stay closer to home. And then that's where Brad Agus was the coach at that time. Had some good conversations, and felt pretty valued, and like, hey, I'm going to come here and I'm going to have a real opportunity to do something. And that was really important to me, that I was going to go to a place and, have an opportunity to, really make a name for myself and really be a part of things from a pretty early point.
Yeah, I keep bringing Charlie and Lucas up, but just it rings in my ears when talking to them. Like, they obviously played at UW, but Seattle U on par. Not the powerhouse that UW would be, but the success and the tradition behind the program. I think, that is very strong. Point being that if I'm a Seattle kid, understanding and knowing Seattle, and I've got the opportunity to stay in and around that from, again, another 3 or 4 year development time frame, massive development time frame, because I'm 18, 19, 20, 21 years of age. But I can stay in and around that area, being from there, being local from there, understanding what's the Sounders and the tradition that they have, that whole Pacific Northwest. If there's an opportunity for me to stick around and stay at home and continue my football development in that area, that's, for me, that would have been a no-brainer. I think I was trying to get out to that area. I ended up in Port. We played at Portland when I was in school one time, and I was just like, this place is ridiculous. Like, I would love to be in this area of the country. But yeah, and I got to believe that that plays into the part of the process of why you would have picked Seattle U, um, being local and understanding understanding where you're at on a daily basis. Still being able to go to Sounders games and see what's transpiring from that standpoint. And I know there's involvement from you and your family from the Sounders, but yeah, like, why would you say no if that opportunity presented itself? Even though there's some other unbelievable schools that you mentioned, if I can stay in and around Seattle, continue another 3, 4, 5 years of my development, I'm not saying no to that.
Yeah, and I think having those opportunities where I had those existing relationships really stood out to me too, of just being like, hey, there's, movement. I think it was right around that time they were announcing, Sounders were going to become an MLS club. I had been training with them from, when I was 16. So, Brian had let, a number of us come and, be a part of things and contribute to their training sessions and kind of just introduce us to that environment, which was another, you know, big bonus to that move to Emerald City, really opening doors and kind of just creating opportunities that wouldn't have been present otherwise. Um, and so just keeping connected to that whole fabric of things that was taking place. Um, how conscious of it I was at the time. I mean, it's like you're thinking about things, it's like, hey, in the summer, what am I going to do? I'm going to get to play here. I'm pretty much guaranteed onto this local team. I can go stay at home. I don't have to be hauling all over the place. Like, it becomes a much simpler thing, to just kind of keep something that's a lot more steady and continuous. And, I think that consistency was really beneficial for me. And then when the Sounders, MLS era rolled around, fortunately Brian stayed involved with that as an assistant coach at the start. And then, through my college years, I was, getting invited out to train with them on a pretty regular basis. And, like I said, that was college was where I finally really hit like my physical development. I mean, my freshman year, I was like 5'6" and about 120 pounds if I was wet, and so, but then I exited at what, 5'8" and about 155, so I mean, not like a tank or anything by any means, but I'm like, that's a notable difference. Yeah. Lots of push-ups. But it was that all of that development, everything kind of like came together for me in that time period.
Well, okay, so you mentioned Brian helped kind of bring you along to Emerald, and I know he was that Sounders head coach at that time, and they weren't in the MLS, they were in the USL. And then 16, 17, 18, he starts to kind of bring you along into some Sounders trainings, age group trainings, or in and around the first team trainings. They wouldn't have had age group trainings at that time, so it would have been around the first team trainings because they're still the USL setup. But my point being, you staying there to go to college, to go to university, kind of then helps in the process, the networking with the Sounders, because you're familiar with them. They're familiar with you. Brian's familiar with you. He now can watch you, or his assistants or his scouting network can watch you in college over the course of the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, however long you're at school. That, whether or not that helps you specifically, but that helps in the process of I'm here right on your doorstep. I'm not in your environment on a daily basis, but you can still see me on a daily basis. I'm still networking and talking to you on a regular basis. So building that relationship, and then that then helps you if they are interested in you moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big thing, was just keeping on a radar, and that's something I became more conscious of as time went on, of just being around there and having been introduced to those in those earlier, the teenagers in high school leading into college, of getting to be around the first team because I mean, yeah, like you said, there was no youth system at that point for the Sounders. It was first team or nothing, and so I got to play with some of those guys. Someone like Roger Levesque who went on to play in the MLS, and then there was Leighton O'Brien who was just an incredible player.
So you say Roger Levesque. Okay, talking again, bringing Mickey and Charlie up. There was a goal that was scored by a boy. I think he's at like Dallas right now. Boy Sam Sarver, and he scored a goal. And he did Roger Levesque's scuba dive over the billboard, like backdrop behind the. You understand what I'm saying? Charlie and
I
Miki were
do.
kind of like they saw Sam Sarver, the recent celebration, do it, but I was like, no. You got to understand that was Roger Levesque with the Seattle Sounders back in the days. He did that celebration. He's got to get ownership of that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that name up. That's brilliant. We're meeting on that little more that age frame, just a little bit closer there. That's good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And he had another famous one where when they're playing against the Timbers and he scored and they had him getting chopped down and he just this little tip over thing of the tree falling. So it was he loved his celebrations, but really good guy. And he actually I interact with him now. He's involved in the Washington Youth Soccer Federation here. So we're back to kind of interacting in that professional space now.
So Mike Wilson would be tight with Roger. So you got to make sure you let Roger know, I'm trying to get Mike on here and yeah, small world here, football world. Anyways, sorry.
Yeah.
You were saying.
No, I mean it's yeah, it was just, getting to be around those types of people who are playing at that level and then um putting the work in and being really committed and it was kind of a series of moments in my life where I was just making decisions of what I wanted and it was just diving deeper and deeper into being like this is really all that I want. This is the one thing that I want to do is play this game. It is what stands out in my life the most as what I enjoy the most, what I find the most joy from, what I feel gives me the most purpose. And like I said, it was from a really young age. I was had that feeling and that sensation that this is something I'm really connected to. And then as these kind of different moments of formation and opportunity and adversity and things came around, it was just I'm making decisions with that framework in mind of like this is really the priority for me. This is the primary driver of like what I want to do with my life. And then so in college it was okay, how am I going to take that further? And so it was starting to be really a lot more conscious of you know how fit am I, how am I living, what am I eating, like how am I really taking care of myself and how am I giving myself every opportunity knowing how difficult it is to have a chance to go and do this, because like there's exceptional players and incredible, people who want this all over the world. And, there was a period of time where it's like, I probably wasn't living the way that I should have. And so it's okay. I have to sit back and I have to make a decision of, am I living the way that I believe I should be to reach the goal that I want to go and reach? And so I kind of hit my sophomore junior year of college. I would say my sophomore year, and it was like, all right, I'm going to make some real decisions here about taking this really seriously. I went to our strength and conditioning coach. I said, I want extra, work with you because I'm not big enough. I'm not strong enough. I need more. I need to be stronger. I know that I'm, not a big guy, but I need to be more powerful. I need to be more athletic. I need to build this. I have these targets in mind. And then was talking to, key people. Talked a lot to with Darren Swatsky, who was involved at the Sounders Academy for a long time. Then obviously he's been a long time, Richmond United coach. He actually just left. He's heading over to Eugene, Oregon, but he was a great kind of, confidant and figure to sort of give me some advice and guidance. And, was just kind of advised me like, hey, here's what your timeline probably is. I was looking at my junior year, wasn't really happy with the direction of the team at Seattle U. I could see it kind of like going the wrong way. And I was really worried of how that would impact me and my opportunities. And was having a chat with him like, hey, is it time? Am I there? And, I appreciate that he was honest enough and respected me enough to say, no, you're not. And he's like, you're not far, but you need more time. You're not on that. You're not there. You need that extra year. You need that extra time. It's not your moment yet. And so trusted him on that and, stuck with it. And then was fortunate to kind of have those opportunities begin to present themselves in those, once I was into my senior year of college.
Cool. So you mentioned Darren there as a mentor. Um, and I think he would have been a youth coach of yours. Is that kind of where you guys first started a relationship? How did you meet Darren?
I mean, Darren's been around, he's been involved in the game. He's kind of a known entity for a long time. I didn't play for him at the youth levels, but then while the Sounders were still in the USL, they were, kind of playing with the idea when the PDL was a thing before, and now it's USL two. But um, of creating like, hey, kind of a reserve team and really identifying these local college guys to make like an under 23 type of team. These guys that we're just kind of tagging and targeting and looking at of like, hey, we think they might be someone we'd look at down the line. And so, he helped pioneer that, and he'd come and saying hi. You say hi.
Uh-huh. Hi.
um, and so, yeah, he was pioneering, getting that under 23 program built. He was coaching it. And so that would be where I had probably my first formal interactions with him would have been at that 19, 20-year-old age when this was kind of getting up off the ground. And then it grew into, he started transforming it into something more. He was heavily involved with the academy, running an under 23 team under the Sounders banner. And so, just through involvement with those sorts of things, built a more of a relationship with him, and got to know him and as a coach and as a person. And then, he was always willing to, give advice and, try to help me. And as he was trying to help anybody that he worked with.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that was my point. I know he's a mentor of yours, and I know you've known him since you were a youth or late teens, and he's helped you just in different ages, I guess, in your game, in your development, different opportunities and whatnot. So yeah, that's just somebody you've leaned on, and that's known you for a long time, that you trust. That's a confidant of yours that knows you. Um, yeah, so that's yeah, and that's a huge piece. And then you talk about you were when you were discussing with him specifically about is this the right time for me? I think is where you were alluding to try and become professional. Is it after my third year of university, leading into my last year, or do I need to come back for my last year? And I'm glad you brought that or discussed that, because bringing Charlie and Lucas back up in their conversations, they were obviously drafted after their senior years of school. So that was always, I think, expected, an expectation of theirs, or being within the program at UW, that was what was going to be offered to them. Whereas your journey, again, the ups and downs of it, having that conversation: is this my time, or do I need to come back to school for another year of development? At Seattle U, and is that going to happen after my senior year? Everybody's journey is different from that end. It doesn't, just because this is the way you potentially could go, doesn't mean it's going to be the way that it's going to go for me. And then you talked about it before. This is something. This is you hit why and purpose, which is something I've got in my notes. So I'm glad you brought those two words up. You hit on those. You identify this is what I want to do, and the purpose behind it. So I'm going to knock on every single door. Where are the opportunities going to be presented? Am I going to talk to a mentor that's going to, that knows me from an earlier age, that knows my strengths, that's going to, provide confidence, and that, potentially could provide opportunities for me. So everybody's path is different. Everybody's journey is different. The process for everyone is different. Even though, this is the way, it could go, doesn't mean it's necessarily the way it's going to go. And you, I know, are a perfect example of that. And, and that's why I love talking to you about it. So going into my senior year, I have a decent senior year, or like, yeah, how does that end up panning out? And yeah, how does that end up looking like for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was a fairly frustrating time because, like I said, the team was not moving in the direction I would have been hoping it was. We were struggling. It'll be a point where I don't name any names, but the recruitment was not going well. We just weren't bringing in the right profiles, the right personalities, and it was just not coming together on the field. And that was pretty difficult to deal with, especially as I'm like, hey, I'm in my final stages and I'm really trying to do something. And I feel like I'm not being put in that right position. I'm not being supported in that, goal of mine to be playing with and, with really good players, trying to have a top, competitive experience to put me on that platform, to have people notice me and recognize, what I'm doing. It's like, cause winning 3 games in a season is not really going to be what people are, they're not going to be paying attention to you for for the reasons that you want. So, um, that was difficult, but I tried to make it, to a point of like, well, I'm going to train super hard. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to showcase the best that I can and try to get the most out of this. And then, do all those extra bits, look after myself, try to do all these things and then seek out those opportunities. How often can I get off and train with the Sounders? Um, Actually, to the point where I did catch an NCAA violation and pick up a 1 game suspension because I was, going out and chasing games so much that I went and played in a reserve game. And it got reported. So I picked up a 1 game suspension from that one. But I mean, I was so desperate and hungry to have more than what I was being provided because I knew what I wanted. I mean, that was a point, like I said,
Mm,
especially for my junior and senior year, it was a real single-minded focus. I said, this is what I want.
mm.
And that made some friction within the space I was in because I didn't feel that ambition was being matched. Of I said, this is what I want to achieve and the kind of group that I want to be a part of. And, had guys who were complaining, oh, this isn't fun, we're having to work too hard. This kind of thing. This isn't why I play and all of that. I'm like, we started out of that my senior year. We said, hey, what are we expecting? Like, what's our season going to be like? And someone was like, oh, I think, if we have like, we're going to play 15 games. If we have like a 9-6 record, that's pretty good. I said, you let me know which 6 games are okay to lose and I won't show up. I said, what are we talking about here? I said, why are we coming in and saying we're ready to lose 6 games out of 15? I said, like, this is a waste of time if that's our mindset. Like, we should be coming out and saying, we got 15 games. Let's go 15-0. If we lose the first one, okay, but we did it, we tried to not. And then it's like, okay, we're going 14-1. Like, we're not accepting that there's going to be this X number of games. Like, yeah, it's fine. We're going to lose them and that's okay. Like, this is a Division 1 collegiate level team that's trying to take itself seriously, and it kind of just alarmed me that was the approach. Some people are saying, oh, it's realistic. I'm like, yeah, but I think you're just setting up to accept failing, and I wasn't ready to do that.
And then there's like a desperation that comes into to play, kind of seeing the end of the university career kind of coming, at the end of my senior year, but then still having that fire and that hunger to want to continue developing and playing at a good level, and then knowing the opportunities and the levels that are out there. So there's almost like a desperation that starts to fester inside, and that is almost the fire that's driving you. Yeah, so that's a struggle. That senior year, that's a struggle. How does it pan out from that standpoint? Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just really focused on doing well on my own, and then trying to get the most out of that experience wherever I could. And then once that was over, I was just, into, heavy training mode of just, we played our last game and I managed to get an invite to the combine. And so, I just trained relentlessly preparing for that. Um but then went and I'll honestly had an absolutely disastrous first day. Did not perform well at all, but then managed to do much better the next couple of days. I think really played a lot more to the level that I would expect from myself. And the one that I thought, put me on radars. And so I knew there was a few clubs um at that stage through, where how I've been performing in college and then what I went and did at the combine of, Sounders obviously had me on their radar for a long time. Portland had me on, the Galaxy, and then Dallas were the four that kind of like I had been informed of that were like, hey, you're not number one on our list by any means, but you're in that mix and you're someone that we're looking at and considering and would be I was someone in consideration for all of those teams. And so, then it was just kind of like, okay, well, how do I capitalize on this? How do I make something happen?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that was that I've just got to keep training to be ready for whatever may come. Someone might call and be like, hey, we need you to come down and we need you to be ready and we need you to do this, or we're going to invite you to preseason, or we're going to draft you, or whatever that might be. So I was trying to play and train and do something pretty much every single day. And to the point where actually that January before the draft, I I opted to actually leave school right before the draft because I just said this is what I'm gonna do. And then
Hmm.
I took a calculated gamble on that one, but I knew it's what I wanted. I said even if I don't get drafted, I'm gonna be chasing this. I'm gonna be hunting this, and so I said I want to focus on this as my primary thing. Fortunately, about a week after I withdrew from school, I got drafted by the Sounders. So there that was a week where it was better for me to not be at home. um, with my mom being a teacher and my dad being a highly educated guy, it was not a well received choice. But it was just I was determined. I said this is what I want to do, and I'm gonna find a way to make this work. And fortunately, the opportunity presented itself.
Love it. So the Sounders call you in. Does that mean I'm going into preseason with them? Is that what the call up means at that stage?
Yeah, so I was pick number 47. So a little bit down the line there. Which is basically you're not guaranteed a contract, but you're in preseason, they own your rights. So they're kind of making a claim for you. And then I went and did preseason there and it was going okay. Um, but it was always long odds. I was going to make that midfield. It was like Ozzy Alonso was still running around in the midfield at that point. And I was like, well, I'm probably not going to take that guy's place. Um, so then I was getting converted to being a left back. Sorry, you go ahead.
So I'm just a, I guess the understanding now. Meek, Lucas Meek, and Charlie Ostrom. They were drafted. Charlie was around like 33, I think, and Meeky maybe like 37. They're gonna hate me. I might be getting the numbers wrong, but they're in and around those numbers. And I think you just said 47 right there. So do the math, but understand the development and the evolution of MLS to then, or to you, I guess now, into what it is today. Now, or at your time, there wasn't the opportunity of the MLS Next Pro team around. So it was almost like you got to come in and, like you just said right there, Ozzy Alonso, who's going to go down as one of the best midfielders in MLS history. That's who I'm fighting with to get a contract within this first team setup. And if I don't, the Sounders aren't going to really want me. I'm kind of not useful to them at all. Whereas like Meek and Charlie, the evolution of they could kind of be dipped in and around some MLS Next Pro, or there was a little bit more reserve opportunity to them. So I'm curious to see just where that evolved with your how that went for you, as understanding where your time frame was and knowing what theirs is now, so that listeners kind of get an idea of how the game's evolved. It's not so black and white, I guess, is where I'm trying to get to. The opportunities in your time weren't as much as they are now. Not that they are as everything now, but there's a little bit more than they were at your point in time. So the Sounders bring me into preseason. I'm fighting with MLS All Stars to trying to get into a midfield. It's going to be a tough fight. What happened?
Yeah, I got made into a left back. So that was basically what happened. They said, "Yeah,
Which
you're
is
not going
still
to play under
cool.
midfield." But yeah, I mean, I was at the point of saying, "Look, wherever you're going to have me on the team, I'm going to play. It'd be a terrible idea, but you're going to put me in goal, I'll do it." I said, this is where I want to be. This is just feels like I'm arriving at that point. So I was committed to learning how to become a good left back or right back, and then ended up kind of being as a winger. And so I spent time back then. They had kind of that pseudo reserve league going on where it was all guys who were part of the first team, but you would go and kind of play these side on games with the other guys who weren't playing, and then occasionally they'd bring academy kids to kind of fill it in, and it was this sort of early stage attempt at what's become MLS Next and that kind of stuff of like the real sort of development pipeline. But it wasn't, thought out and robust. I mean, we played a team that had, people from their front office stepping on because they couldn't fill the team. I mean, it was like people didn't take it seriously. And so you'd go from, one week I'm playing Juan Pablo Angel and I'm playing Frankie Haydock to the next week. It's like you're playing a 16-year-old who's like, you're never going to play this game as a pro. And so it was a real like kind of inconsistent experience there. But I mean, I still was like, hey, this is the opportunity I have. And, so getting around first team minutes was always going to be tough. And then after a little while, it was looking rough at Seattle, and then Portland were interested in having me. They said they were actually pick number 48 and they were going to take me. And then before Seattle jumped and grabbed me. So they invited me down. I went and played a friendly against the national team. and did well. Thought I had a pretty good showing. Traveled with them to LA, went and played in the reserve game there, and then got picked up by them for that season, and then spent that season with them. Pretty inconsistent, didn't gel really with the philosophy. To one point where I actually asked the question. They were giving me some feedback and a bit of criticism after a performance. One of the coaches said, "Well, you pass too much," and I said, "Well, did you ever watch me play before?" Because that's kind of what I'm known for. It's like, I'll carry the ball a little bit, but I'm a majority, like I'm a connector, I'm a passer, I link things and do that. And like, well, we want you to be someone who, runs with the ball. We want people who are going vertical and up and down and really aggressive and high pace. I was like, that's not really me. And I said, like, that's not me telling you you're wrong, but I'm like, I don't think you paid attention to who I am then, because that's just not the style of player that I am. Um, and so that just didn't align. I just wasn't a right fit for that philosophy and how they wanted to do things. Um, it's kind of a funny thing. You think like, oh, I'm going to make it here and it's going to be this club and it's all going to be fantastic. And it's like, oh yeah, some of this stuff doesn't quite work, and you find yourself getting like, this is all I ever wanted to do, but yet I'm annoyed and I'm frustrated and it's bothering me. And you feel like you feel guilt. Like, at least for me, I felt guilty for feeling that way. I'm like, I shouldn't feel this way because this is what I've wanted to do my whole life. I'm finally reaching that point and I'm not happy about it. Why am I not happy about this? And that was a really complicated thing to go through, and it made it really difficult to play for a while. It made it difficult to perform at a good level. Like, I could feel like a lack of confidence and a lack of enthusiasm, to the point where I just said, like, season ended and I was like, I can't be here anymore. I can't do this. And it was, I walked away from that club, and then did one more year with Seattle, fortunately, kind of doing the same thing in the reserves, um, you know, getting around there, chasing a few first team minutes here and there, and then ended up being let go fully at the what would have been end of 2012, end of that season, which is then a couple months before I came out to New Zealand.
Yeah, thanks for putting a time frame on that right there. That's perfect. And then it this is good because it connects to a couple of our previous conversationalists like Charlie and Lucas, and then even Cole Peverly, who we spoke to last week. And be, Cole was around the Sounders around 2010, I think, around that time, 2010,
We were in
2011
preseason
ish.
together.
Right, exactly. This is fantastic. It's amazing how it's lined up with the three of you that have lined up in the last week or couple weeks, um, and and he was right around it. He was right around the level, and I think they ended up offloading him or sending him to Charleston. I think was the opportunity that was presented to him, but there were still conversations with the Sounders. I think Cole had mentioned that there was a contract on the table. Had he done well at Charleston or after the year at Charleston, the Sounders were going to bring him back in, but he had broken his ankle pretty badly when he was in Charleston, and the Sounders were just like, it's not going to work after that. But that just shows kind of, and then Charlie and Lucas, drafted local boys drafted by the Sounders. They knew who they were, but just weren't there. I don't even know if they were brought into preseasons and whatnot. Or Miki was sent to Miami, and then Charlie was picked up by Chicago. But kind of around that fringe-ish MLS level. And it's just funny how the four of you have kind of have lined up in and around that same kind of that space. And Pevs ends up coming back to New Zealand, I think, and had a couple more overseas opportunities that just didn't hit again. And I'm waiting to see what happens with Meek and Charlie, but I think they found their level. Charlie's killing it right now with Tampa Bay, proven himself as one of the best left fullbacks in that league. And then Meek's just starting to hit a stride right now. He's been unlucky with some injuries, but he was just on the team of the week last week for the USL 1. So, again, point being, you go, if this is what you want to do, you found the purpose of, I want to be a professional football player, I want to find my way in this game. Well, you got to be willing to stick through a lot of ups and downs, and yeah, there's a level, and everybody wants to play in the Champions League, and yeah, I want to sign a contract with top club at X, Y, Z, and but if this is what I really love, and this is what I really want to do, I got to be willing to. Somebody's going to tell me, well, you're not good enough, or you pick up an injury, or I don't like where I'm at. I know this environment's not right for me, which is one of the hardest things to say to yourself. But I still want to find it. I still got to stick in this, and there is a place for me that's going to give me that enjoyment. Why I'm doing it, I know why I'm doing it. I want that enjoyment. Where is that going to be? Where is that place going to be? And Charlie and Meek will be the first ones to say they ended up coming out to they never even heard about this place before, and they ended up coming out and living in this. Charlie, I asked Charlie to give me a little bit of a description, and some of the things he was saying about the building, Sean, and they're talking 2024, man. You know, but they come out to Porua, Wellington, New Zealand, and it kind of flips things on their head for them where they find a bit more of love and enjoyment of the game, and all that stuff comes back to them, and now both of them are back over here in a place, and they're flying right now. And then Pev's having almost to come back to New Zealand based on an injury, and asking himself the question, is this what I want to continue to do? And that hit him admittedly saying that starts to then kickstart him being what I said is he's one of the most decorated domestic players in New Zealand domestic football history. So, yeah, that's cool. How do you end up getting over here? What's the connection to finding your way over here to New Zealand?
It was playing in Portland, and then so you'll know him. So young, he was young at the time, Luis Estevez. So he had been obviously in and around there for a little bit, and then I know he went over to Portugal, and then he ended up in Portland. He got brought over there, and we lived together.
Yep.
So me and him and a couple other guys, the club got us an apartment together, and just kind of like, hey, you're all going to be living together and doing that. So spent that time in Portland altogether. And then actually when, he had kind of I would say an equally unpleasant time with Portland. Um, and then I ended up getting him brought up to Seattle, and he was playing on the under 23s for the Sounders with Darren. And so got him, into that mix, and we were playing together there when I would play with the 23s, and then I'd, go do my stuff with the first team and the reserves and all of that. And so I was kind of across those three spaces, but it was just through him. And when I got let go, and I was just kind of like, I did a couple combines and a few things in the US, and I was just like, I just don't think this is what I want to be doing. This system, like, it's just, hauling all over the country and these like short-term stops and trials and all this kind of thing. I was like, I'm kind of burned on that. I've been doing that for a while, and it was starting to kind of, I could feel it weighing on me mentally, and it was straining, my life and my personal relationships, with my family and with people. And it was just, it wasn't rewarding me anymore. And then so he mentioned, he's like, hey, I could put you in contact with, Nate Winkle, who was, running the academy at that point in time. And then so got on, an old school Skype call with Nate. Had a few conversations, and he said, "Hey, look, like, you can come out here, you can stay in the building, and you can train. You'll do a bit of work. You work in the school programs." I was like, I think I ended up my first day doing weeding, just helping out around the building. He's like, you can just come here, be a part of things, and train, and we'll help you find a club, and you just kind of we'll see what you're about, and we'll make some recommendations from there. And I kind of was just like, that sounds cool. And then 2 weeks later, I was on a plane out to Wellington. So yeah, it was I kind of look back at, I did this the other day of looking back of like, oh, the circle of how I got to being where I met my wife and had my kids over in Spain. And I said that actually ties all the way back to going and playing in Portland. As you kind of connect all the dots of all these different things. But yeah, that was how I ended up in New Zealand, was through Luis. So I just talked to him not too long ago and sent him a message yesterday, and still in touch, and really just terrific guy, going and killing life over in he's around, I think he's in West Virginia now, West Virginia, or DC area. He's in and around there now.
Oh, big shout out to Luis Estevez, no doubt. That I I should have had him on with you at the same time. That would have been amazing. Um, now that I think about it, but no, I got to hit him up because I might actually, now that I think about it, get him, Awad, and Withers on at the same time. Get the three of them on at the same time. I think that might be the go.
That'd be a
Yeah,
crew.
I think that. Well, their little St. John's kind of connection there, and then just how that would then spawn into wherever else that would spawn into. But yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah. Shout out to Luis. Um, yes, he would have been. He would have been one of the first individuals that I ran into when I walked into Olay when I first got into New Zealand back in 2011. Luis was one of the first bodies that we kind of started to. Nate was very instrumental in molding him and getting him ready to go. I think he had just come back from a bit of a stint in Portugal, and then he was getting ready, I think, to go over to the States and whatnot. But okay, that was the connection of what got you down to New Zealand. And then you arrived, but put a time frame on that because I want to make sure I'm right with this, but I think that was like early 2013. I want to say, is
Yeah.
that right? Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. February. Yeah. February 2013. Start of February.
perfect. That because that whole time frame from the start of that 2013 time frame, that's kind of a bit of a reset as far as the academy goes, as far as Western Suburbs connection with Olay goes, or a bit of a reconnection, I think, back at that stage. And then um, Declan Edge brought a group of boys down from Hamilton at that time to stay in the building, to live in the building, and then how that whole process evolved from that starting point. Um, but yeah, help walk me through a little bit of that. So you arrived in February 2013. Declan would have arrived with his crew a little bit prior to that, January 2013, probably a couple weeks before you arrived. And there was a lot going on in and around that time. Turf going down at the facility. Again, when I'm talking about Western Suburbs and Olay, there was a reconnection that was starting to come back into play because there had been a bit of a separation for whatever reasons and whatnot. Um, but there was a lot that was going on at that time. And I had been there a couple years prior. I had started in January 2011 is when I had started at Olay. And there wasn't much going on at that time with Nate or myself. And then David Plowright's another one that I have to get on at some stage. The three of us kind of managed it in 2011 and then 2012. Nate started to make a bit of or made a bit of a relationship with Island Bay to help the crew that we had recruited that were living in the building at that time, 2012, have a vehicle to play. So we had a bit of a separation with Western Suburbs at that point in time, but it was needed, it was necessitated because we had to have a vehicle to play. And then 2013, everything was kind of coming back into flux because we got the turf back in the academy. We started to come back with Western Suburbs, which all made sense. Um, but yeah, what would that have looked like for you? Because it would have looked like different for me. But then you and I kind of coming together at that point in time because I was living in the building. So we had lived there 2013. We would have lived together in the building for a year together
Yeah.
at that time. A lot of working together,
Yeah.
but I saw things a lot differently than what you would have seen. And I need some perspective from what it looked like from you coming in at that point in time specifically.
I mean, yeah, it was really interesting because I was kind of coming in and I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, it's probably a case like I probably could have researched a little bit more, but the reality was like, hey, Luis recommended it, had a chat with Nate. Sounds good, I'm going. That was about as far as it went. I was like, I'm kind of just ready to do something different with my life. And so just went and did that. And, that is that building's got some stories. It was I mean, it wasn't, I can say I didn't know what to expect, but it probably wasn't that. But at the same point, I was like, okay, it's, figuring it out. This is what we're going to do. This is what I've committed to. And I still have a photo on my phone of like standing on that upper balcony. I'd taken a photo of when it was all dirt, when they were, just like in those late stages of doing the turf. They had done all the underground stuff and then they just put the dirt back on and then they were going to start, all the layering to get to the actual turf stage. And so I remember being that and I was like, well, this is going to be really cool when this is done. Like, this is going to be so cool. I'm telling people, I'm like, there's going to be this, brand new turf field right outside. I can just walk down and use it. Like, that's really cool. And so, um, but I remember those early morning training sessions of driving down to Wakefield We're getting up real early so the boys could go do their correspondence school studying and do all of that during the morning into the afternoon. And so yeah, just getting up and hauling down, and I was like trying to get my bearings of no idea what time zone I'm in.
So again, context here, right? Ole has no field to play on when you turn up. It's ripped up because we ripped the grass field out and we're getting ready to insert the artificial surface that is there today. So when you turn up, there is no pitch, playable pitch. There's like an open area of dirt and diggers and trucks and fencing. I got all the pictures. I had like
Yeah.
weekly pictures, dude, from like when they first started it. But you turn up and they're like, yeah, you're sold on. I'm coming here to play. I'm coming down to New Zealand to play for this. It's not professional, but it's professional club or professional academy attached to a club. So proper football environment, full training environment, living in the building, in the dormitories. You've got everything provided for you in the building that you need from a living standpoint. Kitchen setup, change rooms, everything you need from that standpoint. But you turn up and yeah, there's supposed to be a field on site. There's no field. So where do we train? Well, we get in our vehicles and we drive from Pororua to Wellington to Wakefield Park because that's the closest and only one of two. I think Tafaya was artificial at that time. So one of two artificial surfaces in Wellington. So basically the only place that we could train on a full-time basis because that was our purpose. That's why we had 18 boys living in the building that we'd recruited from all over the country. And we told them, well, come live with us. You can train every day of the week, but then we don't have a field to train on. So we've got to go down to Wakefield. And yeah, I mean, tell me I'm wrong. I think we were going down there at least 3 days a week. At least 3 days a week we were going down there, at least.
Oh yeah.
So then
Yeah,
we
I mean
had to
those
get the
early
boys,
mornings.
but then we had to get the boys back to school because they were still in school. And when I say school, I mean like they had tutors that would come to the building, I think, at that time.
Yeah.
So the boys would be in the building classroom that we had set up for them, and tutors would come in, but they had to get back for a certain time. It was like 9:30 a.m. So we'd have to be down at Wakefield, but then they wouldn't turn the lights on because the council doesn't turn the lights on till a certain. So if the lights, luckily it was still summer when we had started, but then when you're moving into that was chaotic, and we did that for at least a couple months, I believe. At least a couple months, I believe we did that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
that was
would say my
unbelievable.
first 2 months we were bombing down there. I mean, I remember there was a point we were just being like, park the cars as close to the field as you can and turn the high beams on, and that's going to light the field, and we're going to start the training down by the fence there where it's closer so we can have some daylight when we started getting to like late
And so we
March, early April. It was like
and then we had to get back for breakfast because the chefs were making us breakfast. We had to eat before they had to go to school, and so it's like it's great to just rock up right now, and the kids get to rock up and they rock up in their training gear and rock right down to the turf. And it was like, yeah, we'd have to be in the car. We were in the cars at 6 o'clock in the morning, getting down to Wakefield for 6:30, getting on the turf for 6:40. That was awesome. But those were awesome. That's the stories that we had, and then the conversations that allowed us, to and from, and then just from a professional standpoint, time management and making sure gear was ready. We had to haul all the gear had to be hauled down there. We had to take all the gear with us down there. I mean, that was you couldn't ask, I think, from a better learning standpoint. But oh my gosh, that was unbelievable. But yeah, you were instrumental in that. You were a huge part of that. Yeah, so then we get the turf. The turf gets installed. I think in and around early April, we got to start training on that on a consistent basis. So then, yeah, how does that year end up looking like for you? That first year with Wests and with the academy. Funnily enough, I think I was coaching Island Bay at that time,
yeah.
2013, I think. So, and we were in the league below Western Suburbs, and we were kind of figuring out when you showed up, like kind of where you were going to fall. And I was like, yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to use them. And And then, and then I think Declan was pretty adamant, like, well, you're not going to use him. I'm going to keep him for us. And then that kind of ended up how you ended up with Wests. And yeah, how did that year end up panning out for you?
I mean, it was great. It was really good, and I mean, it ended up being exactly what I kind of needed from life too, of just a real reset, something different. Because like I said, I'd been picking a lot of stuff of like, hey, there's the familiarity here. I'm in an area that I understand, that I know, and I have these connections. And then it was just like, that's kind of leading me into all the same places, and I don't really want to be in those places anymore. It's not kind of hitting how I want it to. I'm not getting where I want to get to. I need something really different, and that, Ole afforded me that. Ole and West and all of that, and just life in New Zealand in general. It just afforded me the opportunity to kind of just reapproach life, and reapproach, my connection to the game and just how I went about things. And I think, people like you and Nate and Declan, and then even those boys that were there, that whole group of everyone that came together, it was really valuable for me. Just, I mean, on a personal and a human level, like I love the times that we would just sit in the office, like after we do all the trainings and stuff, and then we just go out and we're just hanging out in the office. And, I'm sitting there and I got stuck doing all the all the coding for the games on Game Breaker. So I was doing all the coding for the games, which was a multi-hour process every time to manually code every game.
Because I'm doing the VOX Sport GPS. I got the GPS systems I'm downloading that I got no clue what I'm doing from that end, but I'm downloading the GPSs on a daily basis. Yeah, everything started to change from that point. In terms of the reset with the academy and the relationships with Wests and everything that what it is today. But that was kind of the start of the reset in and around that time frame. And you were instrumental right in that nut of everything right then. And you hit on it there. Nate was kind of overseeing from a directorial standpoint. Nate was overseeing everything, managing the building, managing all of us, staff, everybody that lived in the building. Declan was overseeing the coaching end, so he was managing us as coaches, and what we were doing from a playing standpoint. I know you helped out a lot with that. And then all of you guys as players and all the boys living in the buildings that were at different areas, ages, developments within their own time frames individually, where they were at, whether they were involved with me and my team or Declan and his group. But yeah, what do you have to say about that whole group? I mean, shit, we were living with each other daily, living together. There were like, if I can count it, it would be close to 25 people that would have been living together in that space, which is unbelievable. And again,
Well, yeah,
we
because
all have our
both.
different perceptions on everything that we saw or that we recall, or what was and what not. But yeah, what was it like for you?
I mean, yeah, because I was thinking back, both dormitory areas were full. I mean, you go in those upstairs areas that I don't know if they still look that way now, but I mean, they had all the divided bed areas, and they were, I mean, it was every bed was full. And even
There's
there was
only
the two little back rooms.
there's only one living space now, and one of the dorms then is now like an office space. It's kind of our coaching area. It's not a dorm anymore. So there's only the main dorm living space with those two apartments back on the end. That's the main dorm space. But it might be half filled today, maybe. Where, yeah, exactly right. I mean, we were bulging at that time, just in terms of how many people were living in the building in that space. And you were upstairs. I had my own little space downstairs, to be able to get away from everything. But you were upstairs with the boys and everything. Like, who was there? I forget. But I know a few people. But who was there? Who do you recall being in those spaces? Who did you spend a lot of time with?
Well, it's kind of funny because of another full circle moment. So Josh Green was there. He lives in Mercer Island now. So he's
Well,
here. He went to Seattle U
but
and he got married
but
and
he
he
went to
lives in Mercer
Seattle U.
Island.
So if I'm if I'm talking about the process, and again, our journeys are all different, and why are we doing this? We love the game. Awesome. It's going to provide us each different things. Josh was one of Declan's group that he brought down to us back then in 2013 that we helped get over to school, that had an unbelievable career at Seattle U, the same school that you went to, that now you're telling me that I didn't even know that has now, has a job and living his adult life in an unbelievable place in Mercer Island, dude. That's just that for me, that's everything. Whether or not you've made it as a professional football player, that you telling me that right now is everything. And then please tell Josh I said hello.
Yeah, will do. I met with him a little while ago and met at a teriyaki place on Mercer Island. He just had a kid about a year and a half ago. So he's got a little boy named Benji. So yeah, he's doing great. But yeah, so he was one of those boys. Yeah, the two Muhammad I did and Muhammad Awad, Harry Edge, Jesse Edge, Corey Brown, Harry Martin, Elliot Collier, Ryan Thomas, Dan Looker. I mean, there was Bailey Webster, Daryl Hannah. There was a lot of bodies hanging in and around there. And I mean, yeah, I probably ended up spending the most time around like Josh, Daryl, and like Jesse. I think those are probably the three boys. And I was kind of in a funny sort of in between social space because I was closer in age, I think I was closer in age at that time to those boys than I was to anyone on the staff. Except with the exception of like Kyle. Um, but then, yourself and Declan and Nate and kind of anyone else who was around is like, there's actually a bigger gap from me to you guys than there was from me to like some of those, like Josh was one of the older boys who was, 18, 19 at the time. I was 22, 20, I was 23. Um, so I was kind of more socially, I was kind of in these in between spaces where I'd go and be professionally hanging out here with you and Desmond and Declan, and we're in the office and we're working, and then I'd go upstairs and be kind of in the chaos with all the boys and kind of interacting into there. And so I kind of this interesting duality of life going on of sort of occupying those two distinct spaces of professional life, working as a coach, as a staff member, and then going up and be like, well, we're also teammates, we're playing together, and we're not that far apart in age, some of us, so we're kind of socially in a similar plane.
But I think the beauty of that, I think it's twofold almost. It's almost like us as coaches need a senior player. I don't know if you mentioned Tyler Lissette. Was Tyler in and around it when you were there? Was Tyler there?
He was the next year. I think he was still injured when I first got there because he had those injury issues. But the year after that, when I had gone, so I played that season, and that was when we weren't formally like Ole is West, like it kind of became like how I think it is now. It was more of, well, this is a place where we'll send guys, and so it was like I played there, Ryan played there, um, Pedro, Muhammad and Pedro played there. Harry was there. Jesse was there. There's
Mm-hmm.
kind of this crew of like 7 to 8 of us who are from Ole
Mm-hmm.
who also played there, which, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, really snowballed into that relationship formalizing. Lloyd O'Keefe was the coach. And, so we went and had a really, it was a super fun season. I think it was kind of like that first point of like, okay, this thing's on the map now of like players come from Ole, they source, one or two guys from somewhere else, and then they come in here, they join this local team, and they drive that team into, being competitive. And we would do some friendlies. I remember we played, Miramar in a preseason friendly, and that's when I was kind of like making my name for myself a little bit and being like, hey, I'm here building an impression. Um, but yeah, it was getting that relationship going and all of us playing there, and then that springboarded me into having the opportunity where I went and spent a month with Auckland City. Um, they opted not to take me as a foreign player that year because that was the year all those restrictions arrived, and then so I
Mm-hmm.
went to Hawke's Bay instead, where I played for Chris Greatholder and had I mean, it was really a terrific season that got unfortunately derailed by administrative problems. We got basically kicked out of the playoffs because of administrative issues. But I mean, just really fantastic, playing experience. Played with like David Mulligan, who's obviously, was a big name in New Zealand, played for the All Whites. had a really great time, and then came back after that season wrapped when it was still the, summer ASB
Mm-hmm.
Premiership rolling into, Central League um, play, which, I really enjoyed that kind of just like, hey, we're just ticking over and we're doing this kind of thing. And so then came back, and then that was the year where that would have been 2014, where Declan
Mm-hmm.
became the head coach. You were the coach of the Cap One team.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really like intricately linked now, where it's like Ole and Wes are one now. We're really doing this thing together. And I think that just, really supercharged everything, where, we saw Ryan go off and start doing what he was doing because he was just such an exceptional player. And boys started finding their own and finding their way into, Pedro started building his reputation, and, we had those other younger boys coming through like Owen Parker Price. And I think around then, like Callum McCout was coming in. We had Marco Stamenik when he was in the Friday night football when he was like 9, 10 years old. And, he was just bullying all the young kids at that point. But, and I mean, that's been pretty cool for me to see those boys, going and obviously playing at where they're playing now, and, over in Europe, and now at a World Cup, and that multiple generations of Ole, where you have Ryan kind of at like the forefront of it. And then you've got kind of, Callum McCowett coming in, and Elijah Just and Marco, and like these boys all coming through and just being like, I think that's really special. And it's really cool to see, and just be like, far be it from me to take any credit, but be like, hey, I got to be a part of that. I got to see Marco when he was 9 years old, and train him and work with him, and just, see his excitement and his talent starting to showcase itself, and just be like, it's really fun to see that kind of years down the line, have him really be like, you're fulfilling what we thought you could do. You're really reaching what we hoped you would be.
Yeah, I can't wait to get those guys on an episode at some point in time. Those are going to be fun conversations. But backtracking, I think when you talk about that group, it was 2013 ish, when we started to reconnect with Western Suburbs, and Declan sprinkled a handful of the boys in the West's group with Lloyd, and then obviously Declan overseeing what was going on. But you being that, and you said, you alluded to, you're 23 years old and you're in between us as a staff from an age standpoint, and then the players from where they were at from an age standpoint. And that would be difficult to have to move in between those, and you do a hell of a job. I think that's why, why you stuck around so long. But I had touched on it before, but I didn't go into it. I think, us as coaches, we always need that senior player, or if we have the ability to have a senior player within a group, I believe there's nothing more valuable that a team could have. And if utilized correctly, what could come of that. And I think that's where I think we recognize that your strengths from being in the building, living in the building, being around the boys, being around us, and then being able to then translate things that we would talk about to the boys as a group, because they didn't want to hear it from us. You don't want to hear what mom and dad are saying. I don't want to hear what mom and dad are saying. So they're not going to listen to us, but they're going to listen if they see that we trust a senior player that's able to then morph and chameleon, themselves a bit into how they act and talk. There's no bigger power than that. And I think that was we recognize that from again, from an office standpoint, and then Declan obviously recognized that from a playing standpoint, to be able to utilize somebody like you and the strength that you have to be able to bring those boys along. And hell yeah, like, I didn't spend any time with those boys, but I did, but I didn't. But I'm not gonna try and say that I made them into anything that they are. There's too much pressure behind saying something like that. But I know I can talk to Marco, and Marco will remember what you said right there. And it's funny because we never even talk about it. But yeah, when he was not, he'll be the first one to say, when he was 9, 10 years old, that time and what he was allowed to do has then helped him become who he is today, and what we saw 2 weeks ago in the World Cup. And again, that's everything. Whether it's Josh Green just having a baby Benji, or seeing what the boys are doing now on that stage, they know that. And again, it helps. That's why talking to you, it helps solidify my thinking, because I know that. but then I know that you know that as well, and I can't wait to get Declan on in front of us, because he knows that, and he knows what you help provide to those boys, and I know that those boys know that, because they needed somebody to look up to at that point in time in that specific moment, and the way that you were able to model yourself on a daily basis, turning up to training, being the best player in training, performing in games. I mean, I got to believe you're one of the leading scorers in those West teams. Those are all things that they would have
Yeah.
been chasing, but they'd have been 16, 17, 18, and you were 23, 24. But those have been all the things that they were chasing at that point in time, because they had to be chasing something, and you were the most real thing that I think that was in front of them at that point in time. And you can't take that away. Nobody can take that away. Yeah, that's the ego trip for me that I've learned, is, when I first started out on the coaching side after I finished playing, what's next, and this coaching side is appealing, and I've got a degree in education, and I enjoy working with people, and I enjoy working with young people, and but goddamn, I'm going to be the best coach in the world. I'm going to be coaching. Pep Guardiola at the time, Barcelona. I'm going to be the next Pep Guardiola. But then you come to this almost like, how can I best serve the game? And then you look back on kind of time frames and experience that you've had, and how have I best served the game or best served people, and then you recognize, kind of the strengths, that you have, and or that you're best placed, and that's nail on the head right there. For as many as as much as you can, as black and white as it can be, that there, six Olay boys or eight Western Suburbs boys, eight boys that put on a Western Suburbs kit at some point in time that were on that all whites, World Cup squad. However, how more, and we forget how many more are there besides those six or eight, that Elia Collier just had a baby, and Corey Brown's pregnant with his second right now, and has a house, and he's on his second house. And how many of those, Harry Morton, and how many of those besides those six or eight that were at the World Cup? And that's, again, at the nut of everything. As much as it is player development in this game, this game's going to provide you a short window in terms of being able to play it, or it provide for you. And you got a lot more time after that. What do you like as a person? How are you going to then serve things, or be a good person in this lovely world out there? And that's as much fun, if not more fun, than creating a good player. For me, for us. So that's cool. Awesome. More about New Zealand, though, because I think, your playing in New Zealand didn't stop with Western Suburbs and at the academy, and New Zealand's got a lot more to offer than just that too. So where did that then that moved you on a little bit, because I know you had a little bit more playing experience. What else did it look like within New Zealand?
Yeah, so after that second year at West, then that would have taken me to, let's see, I went to Team Wellington, and was playing there, and I did, yeah.
Again, time frames and the evolution, and especially in New Zealand football and whatnot. We're talking now at that point in time, back in 2014, 2015, moving forward from that, it was the franchise in the summertime and then the wintertime. So you'd play with a winter team, Western Suburbs, and then you'd have to be looking for a summer league team, and that's what you mentioned, Hawke's Bay, and to go from there, because it's transition now to now. Next year there'll be a national competition, but the last however 2-3 years, it's been like you could qualify from the winter competition to the summer competition. There is no franchises anymore.
Yeah.
I don't understand it either, but
I liked that summer franchises, man. That was fun. Like, it's a funny kind of condensed league, and is what it is, but I mean, it was a great time, and you got to travel the country and see these teams, and go be a part of that, and I really liked it. But yeah, so then that was, late 20, going into, summer 2014 of going and doing the Team Wellington thing. Mixed bag experience. Kind of felt like a Portland situation to me, of just being like not really gelling with the coach. And so then at that point I decided, I was like, hey, you know what? I've done a bit of time here in New Zealand. I'm kind of getting that taste for like trying something. And so then went and did some time. I came back, did preseason with the Sounders again, actually. So that would have been early 2015. got back into preseason with the Sounders to just be like, I came back on a break. I was just kind of like taking a break. And then um, I, got in touch with Brian and said, hey, like I'm back around. I've been playing. I'm, keeping fit. I think I'm in a good, good way. The last game I'd played for Team Wellington, I was like, I scored 2 goals. So I was like kind of riding a high. I was like, is there any chance I could just get a look? I'm like, I'm not even like pushing too hard. Is there any opportunity there? And they said this was when they were starting their second team, which was, S2 at the time, which then became what is now the Tacoma Defiance. Um, but they were just kind of starting that, and they said, hey, like come in, do preseason with us. Maybe we could consider you for that second team as that kind of materializes, and we'll see. And so did a couple months or about 6 weeks of preseason, and thought I was doing really well. Was like getting really good feedback all the time, like things are really positive. And then it was kind of coming to like decision day of like, hey, we're going to be telling people, you're staying on, and we're going to be signing you, or we're going to be letting you go. And I remember I was like, going to go into my meeting, and a lot of the guys were like, "Oh, for sure you're gonna make it. For sure you're gonna make it." And I was like, "I'm feeling pretty confident." Like I was like, "I'm playing really well. Like feeling really good, playing really well." And it was at the time Jimmy Traore was there, so he was coaching at the time, and he and I had a good relationship, and he'd been giving me really positive feedback and said he really liked me as a player. He'd even independently told my brother, he's like, hey, your brother's a really good player. And so I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty nice about all of this. And so then I go into the meeting and I get let go. Um, so it's like, well, you really never know. Like you never know. And so then I had been like working on lining some stuff up in Europe. And then so I went over to Holland, had an okay time playing in like the third division over there. And then things didn't pan out visa wise. There was mistakes were made, so I had to leave. I went to Sweden, into the third division in Sweden, because they had like a loophole for Americans where like they could apply to get like an extension beyond the normal 90-day like Schengen visitor visa. And so they're like, oh, we can add an extra 90 days on top of that, so we can get you built in and you can stay out here and you can see. um that was my one and only relegation in life, was playing for that team in Sweden. um and then had a brief stint in Armenia, just through like someone I played with actually in Portland, had an agent that could basically plug you into a team in Armenia. They're like, this is just a springboard team. Get in there. They qualify for Champions League playoffs. You go in, you have a good performance, and you get sold to someone. I'm like, okay, cool. I've not got anything else on the radar. Let's try it. Objectively, really, probably my worst footballing decision of my life, and possibly one of my worst life decisions of my life. Just not a good couple of months. And so then I was like, all right, I think I'm done with all of this. And so left Armenia, and it was actually the one and only time that one of my parents like intervened in my life of like me making the choices I was making. And it was a little bit because like this was around, so this would have been late 2015, and it was when there was like all those bombings happening in Europe. There was the bombing in Paris, and there was like the one in Manchester, I believe. And my dad called me and he said, what is the nearest airport to you? And I said, oh, I'm in Yerevan. That's the nearest, this one here. And he goes, great, I just bought you a ticket. You're coming home tomorrow. And he was just like, I don't care if you're mad. And I said, honestly, I'm not. I was like, I'm ready to get out of here. Thank you. And so, but I said, could you not have routed me through Moscow? But anyways, so I went, flew up from Armenia to Moscow, had a 3-hour layover, and then flew back home. Um, Spent a couple months at home, just was training, kind of doing the thing, doing life, and kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And then um, Christchurch United reached out and contacted me and were like, hey, no, wait, no, they were later. Christchurch United was later. Um, it was YBOP.
Why, Bob?
That's who I went to. I went to YBOP at the start of 2016. Um, yeah, went over there, and so then got in with YBOP. Was living with Jesse Edge's girlfriend and her mom. I was staying at their house. Super nice people, just incredibly nice people who took me in. I was staying with them for a little while before then they put me up with a host family up in like Mount Maunganui, Papamoa area, and was playing for YBOP, doing all of that. And then um, which is where I met Stephen Hoyle, who ended up becoming a key part of me going to Spain later down the road. So we were playing there, became good friends playing at YBOP. Um, and then at that point, after I left that, that's when I came and played for Olympic, where you and
2016.
then Stu, yeah, in 2016, where you and Stu were working at, you got me in down to come to play for Olympic at that point in time. Um,
Yep.
Came down there, was helping you out with work at Tawa.
Yep.
We were just doing that stuff over there, running the youth, some of the youth programs, helping them out, and then had that really outstanding season at Olympic, won the league with that really just pretty cool team of a real mix of people. Had just a really fantastic season, won it on the final day, and yeah, which was just a real highlight moment. And then I went to that's after that was when I went to Christchurch United, um, and was playing there, and then stuck around there to take a director's job at one of the local clubs, FC 2011. Went and took the director's job there, and was working there up through the end of 2017, and then had a visa complication when I was like finding that one. I was like, hey, I'm gonna like try for my residency. I've been here enough years. I've been doing all of that. Well, they flagged that some of my visas were inconsistent, and I had technically moved locations in New Zealand between visas, and I hadn't like updated them correctly. And they didn't like how I'd done that, and so they were flagging it and saying, we're not going to be giving you one. You actually need to leave. So I kind of got chased out of the country by the government, which was, pretty disappointing for me. Um, but then, yeah, so it was late 2017, came back to the States like a couple days before Thanksgiving, spent the holidays here. And then January of 2018, Stephen Hoyle, who I played with at Christchurch United, or no, Canterbury United, sorry, at Canterbury United, we went, he connected me with this guy over in Spain who was doing kind of like an Olay type of thing over in Spain. Was like, hey, we're bringing players from all over, but there was just global, like everywhere in the world, housing them, training them, and then trying to move them on to teams. And then created a senior team that was affiliated with that program. And so I did kind of that dual role again, where I was, living in the complex with, living in the building with the kids, and much more of a senior figure at this point, 29, approaching 30 years old. Um, but living there as kind of like an on-site monitor person, doing a bit of helping, so a little bit of coaching with the academy, and then playing with the first team. Um, and then that really drove into I'd done some licensing in New Zealand. Got you know what youth level 1, 2, 3, the junior level 1, 2, 3, and then the senior 1 and 2. And then when I was over in Spain, started working more heavily in the academy while playing full time, with the men's team there, and got up to my UEFA A license and became the academy director. And then after 4 years of working there, stepped away, started my own academy, ran that for a year, and then 2024 moved back. Retired in 2020 from like really professionally playing. I was playing in I finished in I might have been the fourth division, a team called CDS Depona. Finished playing for them at what would I have been, 33, 33, 34. Finished playing and just dedicated to, family and coaching at that point. Um, and then, yeah, March 2024, moved back here to where I am now.
Hence why I say you're a football junkie. You're a football junkie if you're still trying to find your way and you end up playing in Armenia. You are a football junkie for sure. But
Yeah.
but you're just searching for avenues. Like the playing I think drove you. That was what was driving you. That's what I would always in hindsight. That's what I would always think about in conversations with you and texting with you and everything. The playing side was just continuously driving you. Like, where can I? I'm searching to continuously play at a good level. There's still a place I can play. I know there is. And then yeah, it just takes you to these obscure shit. I thought I ended up in some places, but that it just takes you to some places, or if you just like you said, I had to go back and I'm staying with my parents for a bit, and because I'm still just I'm searching, I'm looking, I'm fine, and it's gonna, and then you find your way over in Spain. Stephen through Stephen Hoyle. Stephen is now isn't he the women's coach over in Newcastle? Isn't he working with the Newcastle Jets, the women's side over there? If I'm not
I
mistaken,
believe so.
working with
I
the
know he's
women.
in Australia coaching a women's team. I think that's who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, he's at Newcastle Jets women's A League coach there. I think he's still playing in some capacity because I know I saw something on social media about him playing in some, but that from a time standpoint, he's not going to be able to do that much longer, um, because the women's game it's evolving tremendously in the A League. Yeah, he's in Newcastle Jets, and it just again it just shows you from the football world how small it is, the connection, the network that you had there with him through Canterbury, in New Zealand, and then that gets you over to Spain, and but the playing I think was still driving you because that was still an avenue for you to play at a good level, but now there's more being offered to you, and you're starting to see again age and everything starting. You're starting to see an end a bit from that playing, and then what's next? And you're a football junkie, so you're going to be in this game. But what now is in what's my strengths? Where do I see myself? And that's that my understanding that in Spain, that's kind of what what you're doing now in the game. That's kind of where it started, and that's where the evolution of you from a coaching standpoint, understanding how to. I think I think you saw a lot, or we learned a lot being in that academy space in at Olay in those early days, and you saw a lot there. And then I think you archived that in the back of your mind, understanding you still wanted to play and you had a long playing career ahead of you. And then you land over in Spain, um, at an established or becoming an established again academy slash residential underneath a club situation. You already had that experience in your back pocket, and that experience in your back pocket in New Zealand had a tremendous amount of however whatever adjective you want to use to it. There was a lot there that was able to then help you. I think in what you smiling is awesome. What then happened for you in Spain, and then and what you're doing now today. Um, and that sounded like a tremendous experience in Spain. You're living in the dormitories again. I know you're providing from a playing standpoint, but now I'm offering that experience. What I look like and how I can model that, and now I'm actually implementing my coaching and putting my 2 cents and my imprint on all that stuff. And I assume that's what helped evolve into who you are today from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah, I mean it's funny how much of it I ended up leaning on things that I learned at Olay when I was getting started of like what identity do I want to have as a coach? What is my philosophy? What is my style and my approach to, you know, training players and the style that I want us to have and, how do I want to impart information to these players and how do I want them to learn and what do I want them to take away from this? How am I helping them? And, I take a lot of I took a lot of what I experienced in working with, you and Declan especially, because you were the two guys that I spend the most time with, from a coaching and professional standpoint, from either playing for Declan or, helping, as an assistant, I think, of just trying to help out, helping you, working alongside you. Um, you were the two guys that I was the most closely connected with in that professional space. And so I would say, the ideas that I acquired from the two of you were pretty fundamental in how I really got myself started. My approach to how I utilize rondos and the technical development. And then, even at the time, some of the language that was being used and the formations and some of the habits and, some of the tactical roles of positions and like, kind of how I took on playing. It was like, well, this is how I understand it from a playing perspective. This is how I'm going to try to relay it from a coaching perspective. How do I do that? Okay, well, that ties into all this stuff that we did back there. And so trying to just connect, it was just seeking those connections and creating that identity. Um, and so I borrowed a lot from those days at Olay. And so, you know, whether anyone knows it or not, I mean, there's a tangible, and for a while there was a really tangible Olay imprint on that academy in Spain. Through some of the things like, gaps in the rondos, and, stuff like that, and the threes for juggling, just like little things that only really occurred there. Like I hadn't seen them anywhere else. But I was like, these are fantastic and they're great tools. I still use them to this day. Like there's still some habits that I implement and stuff that I'm doing now because it aligns with the coaching philosophy that I've, continued to land on as I learn more about this game and become more educated in it and kind of study it deeper and, take this new role that I have. Um, and but I still find myself going back to like, hey, these are pretty fundamental conceptual ideas that I really like and I really lean on to then build things out. And like, the graphic I sent you earlier of session planning, like there's some stuff in there that you would probably have spotted from Olay. And um, I think it's really cool to, be able to kind of call that stuff back and be like, see the little seeds that were planted from the different places that then show up now.
Yeah, and it's like there is no right or wrong way to skin this game. And success, can be measured in different ways. I think people can measure it in different ways. But I think the biggest thing, and moving forward, I think that's what we pride ourselves on at Olay, and this is what I want to show in these conversations and the people that I bring on. And but even if they're not affiliated with Olay, I think that it's as much of the development of the player side as it is the person side, and what we can contribute to that. And then again, you hit on it when I talk about the introduction to the process is then we're all brought together through this beautiful game, and how can we contribute? I think moving it forward and passing it on, and so that it's continued to looked at that way, and again, success is measured in different ways. Yeah, that's awesome, Sean. So from that Spain standpoint, like you're moving out of the playing side, and you're moving into the coaching or the management side of that, and now you guys are you're moving players on from that environment as well, right? You're developing them in house, and then you're moving them on. That's what your purpose for the players coming into you there was. That was my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I would kind of tell players at the start of the season, I said, my job is to get rid of you. It says my job is to help you, to develop you, and then that you're not here anymore by the end of the season. Meaning that we've, found an opportunity for you that is bigger and better than what we have here, where you're off, you're either, getting a college scholarship or you are being paid as a profession to go and play this game. And we had a pretty good track record for a while there where we were creating real opportunities and kids were playing and getting to good levels. I mean, I've got guys I coach are still playing in, top three divisions in Spain. Guys who are playing for national teams and, guys who went to play, Division 1 colleges and, went on and had some careers in the game and played professionally at, different places. And, it was, it's a very demanding area to be in, but it's also really rewarding. And with those rewards come challenges of like when it doesn't work for a kid. It's like I would feel that very personally for a long time of feeling like did I let you down? Did I not do enough?
Hmm.
Um, and
Hmm.
so that takes an emotional toll. But yeah, I mean that was the ambition and the intention all the time was just how are we helping kids? How are we developing them? And how are we having them, learn and grow and gain the opportunities that, I was afforded and other people that we play with, like the opportunities that we got. It's like, how can I give you the same or more? How can I, create this for you? And so it was very much that program in mind of just trying to help kids, trying to develop them. And then that was why I ended up, leaving in the, down the line was like I felt that we were straying from that. It started to not feel that the priorities were where they should be. Um, and it was becoming something really special where I mean we had kids who were going on trial at PSG We had ones who were trying out with La Liga academies, and they were, really starting to make waves, and we were getting really recognized. We were like going and beating La Liga academies. We, went toe to toe with PSG, like lost 2-1 with their under 19s. It's like, so, I mean, we were doing something, and it was really,
Legit.
really special and felt like we were getting there. Yeah, it wasn't just because I'm kind of like, oh, come pay us money and we'll pretend that you're going to go do something and it's just going to kind of all be fake. There was a real genuine nature to it that I really gravitated towards and we really dedicated to. And I worked with a really cool staff of people, again, some of whom I'm still friends with and still, collaborate with. One guy, he's from the UK. I've actually just hired him to be the sports scientist for my club now. And we just flew him out here a couple weeks ago. Um, to come and deliver some seminars and meet families and work with the coaches and develop some protocols for our club. So, and I worked with him for, 3, 4 years over in Spain. And so it's kind of how you and I have talked about, you coming and doing something here. I like when those kind of full circle moments happen. And so yeah, it was a really special environment we had for a while, and I was disappointed it went the way that it did in the end, but I'm grateful for the time that I spent doing it.
100%. And I think that's also, that's, that is part of the process and the journey. It's like, what I've learned through football is like you get to places and yeah, it's like it's roses or the project presented in front of you and yeah, and over time things change or people change or for whatever reason, yeah, and but there are other places that if you hold principles and or ways that you see it being done, there are other places that you can find from that standpoint, and that's what I hope we hold it at the core at Olay, player development and developing the people as well. And West's from a club standpoint that allows us that vehicle. They continue to offer that vehicle for our players to play at the highest level that New Zealand can provide. So yeah, so you move on from Spain. The journey in Spain ends, but you did a hell of work there. Again, the work that you leave in your wake, can't be denied, and you find your way back home. I guess in a sense, you find your way back in and around the Seattle area, back to Mercer. Tell us what you're doing now today, and that's how we can kind of wrap this thing up. I guess yeah, finish what Sean Morris is doing now and how his football journey's brought him back full circle to back in the Seattle area.
Yeah. Yeah, so I moved back, like I said, in springtime of 2024 with my wife and 2 kids. Um, and then picked up a job as the director of my title is director of soccer and community for Mercer Island FC. So just overseeing, everything at the club from the competitive side of things to our recreational programs to then just our community outreach, camps, clinics, working in schools. Just what we do interacting with our community as a whole. So I really enjoy it because like I said, I get to be involved with, now as I've found each iteration of my life and involvement in this game has started from, it was me. How am I interacting with it? And then that kind of grew up. So it's okay, how, there's a team element. How am I interacting with that team? And then it became a coach. And it's like, okay, how am I interacting with this pool? And then I became an academy director, and then that expanded, and now I'm in this role where it's like, okay, now I've got a big crew of people that I'm looking after, and I get to work with, and do a lot of things within the community, within our club, and I really enjoy it. It's a super cool community, Mercer Island, and yeah, it's been great. So I worked there for just over 2 years, and then I've just acquired a new role, also working with Eastside, so Eastside FC, and I'm the director of. We've just created a new kind of like branch affiliation that operates Eastside FC Premier level teams on Mercer Island. So they're dedicated in our demographic area, and so it just gives us the intention is that we have a robust player pathway from 5-year-old kids through recreational through competitive all the way up to the premier level, that's the highest youth level outside of the Sounders Academy. We have all of that localized now for us in a really direct in-house pathway, and so that's been my project for the last 8-9 months or so, is getting that like built and off the ground and running. um And it's been a lot of work and a lot of effort, but I'm really excited about what that is doing. And then yeah, love my job with Mercer Island. Amazing people, outstanding community. And then I'm fortunate to get to be around helping coaches going through their coaching journey like I went through mine and others have. And like I said, kind of calling back to the stuff that I recall of being that young coach at Olay and kind of learning from yourself and from Declan and from Nate and these people who knew more and knew better than me, and just be like, okay, now I'm in that position. What would I have wanted to hear? What did I appreciate hearing? How can I have that positive impact that hopefully they will take forward? Because, that's how we have an even greater impact. It's like I can go around and I can affect so many people, but if we affect the right people in the right way, it's just that cascading effect that ripples out so much further. And, you'll have experienced it and I've experienced it. And it's just, you know, we see people go and affect other people, and it ties back to stuff that we did. It's really special. And so, I've talked a lot about wanting to go back to, New Zealand and visit Olay and see everything that's going on there just because of that special connection, that still exists for me there, because of the impact it had on me and because what the impact it's allowed me to have on other people.
Oh, I mean, you're more than welcome to turn up on our doorstep at any point in time. And yeah, I think that's that you hit on so many things right there. But it's like it's the giving back to the game. I mean, that that's satisfying for my soul to see and hear you say those things and to see where you're at right now and what you're doing. Um, because that's everything I think that we hope for, and anybody that we come in contact with. And I would consider you, one of our students. Even though you would have been one of the more senior players at that time, but I would consider you one of our students. So again, seeing what you're doing now in today's day, whether it's involved in the game or not, obviously you're heavily involved, because you're such a football junkie, and seeing what you're doing and then giving back to the game the way that you are giving back to it, that's tremendous. And that's all I could ever hope for. And I think that's all that any of us from an Ole standpoint, a Western suburb standpoint. Dean Eager, I know he remembers the time that you spent at West's. Dave Wilson being attached, I know he knows the time that you spent at West's, and at the academy, and what you did for us there. But yeah, I think that's everything in and of a nut in terms of what the process is. It's taking the learnings and then adding those into whatever you're doing, whether it's the game or not. Um, the beautiful game that we all share together. But if you're not involved in that, you're involved in some other capacity in terms of what life is offering you. That again, you're a good person, and you provide to help and serve other people in the best way that you can. So yeah, Sean, that's tremendous, man, and I appreciate you sharing those stories. Any other stories you want to share with us? Any significant players? Cole Peverly had a few players on his list that he passed in the game that he played against, that he passed on to us. Are there any significant names that you would have played against? I know as an American, I'd probably recognize a few more, or the best football environment you either played and or coached in, and what that might have looked like. I'll throw those to you to wrap this up.
Player wise, yeah, Juan Pablo Angel was a real special player. Played against Frankie
He was just
Hayek.
doing Juan Pablo Angel is just doing some World Cup commentary. He's on one of the Fox broadcasts doing some commentating some games, or doing some of the in between game commentary. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, no, he was. I mean, it was unbelievable seeing the way he manipulated the ball and could just escape pressure. And I mean, he was just, you could see a guy who had obviously played at such an exceptional level. Um, David Beckham probably makes a list. One or two. Played when he was at LA, when I was at Portland, played against him there. So that's always a pretty good one. But then, I mean, and I mean this honestly, I would say in terms of young players I played with or against, Ryan Thomas is probably right up at the very top. I mean, what he was able to do at 17, 18 years old, I have rarely seen someone like that ever. I mean, just all the different tools he had and the way that he played the game and just how he did this. Like, it's not a surprise that he got as far as he did. I think the only thing that hampered him would have been the injuries that he had unfortunately dealt with. But I mean, it was hard. It's hard to comprehend how someone who was, you looked at him and he was so unassuming, but just what a special young player he was. And, so it's great to see him out there. And like I said, that multi-generation of Ole. I mean, and that's for me, it's really hard to get to your second question of like that environment. I I wish I knew now. I wish I knew then what I know now about the game and
Mm,
about coaching and about how you'd approach things, because I
mm,
think I could have gotten even more out of it. But it was so foundational and fundamental for shaping me as a person and as, a coach and as a player. Like I learned a ton from Declan as a player. I learned from you as a player. I learned from both of you as a coach. I learned from the whole environment as a person. Um, it's really difficult to, say that many other environments could be on par with that. I would say the one that we had in Spain when it was at its peak would probably be, pretty similar to that. And I would say just because there was a lot of similarities in terms of,
mm,
the culture that was being created, the environment, the intention, and, the personalities that we had there. There were, the cultural differences of being different people and different, sides of the world, and, Spain versus New Zealand, and then, the different things that we had going on. But just the way that the environment was created, that full-time feeling of people being so eager to play. I mean, those would be pretty close to being on par with each other. And I would say I just knew more in Spain, and it was a little more mature and had a bit more, understanding of how to do things. But the
mm.
time in New Zealand is like, it was, I mean, it was just spectacular. I mean, I really just, I look back on it pretty frequently now and just being like, it was everything aligned, and it was Declan arriving at that time, you being there, those players coming along, reestablishing the partnership with West, like, you said, building the turf, like all these different things. We said it was like it was kind of chaotic and it was hectic and all changing, and it was such a transitional phase, but all of that led to it being something. It was like, this is really special, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard to replicate that. And I think it was done really, really well. Everyone played their part, you know, and it's, Kyle played his part, Nate played his part, you did, the chefs did, anyone, Dave played his part, Mike Wilson is like Declan, and, Levi Rossi when he came through, like all these
Mm.
different people who were a part of it and contributed to it. It was all those different figures and the experiences and how everyone kind of shaped things and provided in their own way that made it really unique and special. Which is why I'm like, to this day, like you can ask my wife, I mention New Zealand on a not infrequent basis as being like, I could go back and live there. I could go back and work in that space. But I have the same feeling towards, being in Spain and being like the lifestyle that we had there and that environment that was created and I got to be a part of. It's like, those are probably the really two standout things in my life of being like, those are really special to me.
Nice. Yeah, that 20 mid to end of 2013, kind of when we got the ball rolling a little bit with just a bit of more of a routine and things stabilized at the academy in 2013. I'm trying not to turn into that old guy, Sean, where I'm looking back on the past and with so much. But yeah, I mean, that was a bit of a special moment in time, and then that 2014 was a bit unique. But yeah, that was a special moment in time where it'd be tough to replicate that again, and then everything that kind of evolved, I think, from that. And that's why I wanted to get you on, especially early, because you help me put time frames together. You help solidify time frames in my mind, and then knowing what you're doing today and where you kind of were at that point in time. That was a huge driver behind why I wanted to see you this early time. So I can't thank you enough for taking your time, because I know how chaotic it could be right now with all those little people running around the house, and the wife being away. And you met the wife and have, like you said, two children now that you met overseas, and the game, I think, afforded you probably the opportunity to meet her, and now what spawned from that is amazing. So I can't congratulate you enough on that. But yeah, just seeing where you're at today, from when, and then seeing how you're contributing to the game, that really makes me feel really good. So please continue to do that. And yeah, you're more than welcome to come down to New Zealand at any point in time. We'd love to have you down, whether it's a short term or a long term. But yes, thank you so much for taking your time, Sean Morris. Wish you all the best moving forward in everything that you're doing. And yeah, I look forward to staying in contact with you as much as we possibly can. So thank you again for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Any chance I get to chat with you, always a good time. So thank you for that. And I know we'll be speaking, we'll be talking.
Right on. Excellent. We will end it there.
I just told you that I'm about it. I might take offense if you tell me that you doubt it. It's just what it is, yeah, I'm known to make it rowdy. Then I'm for the fit, and I drive a wide body. Who you know, but like this, nobody. Can't go slow, I gotta hit that body. I'm the top, but the top, I can't never take a break. Yeah, I'm hot, and you not, that's why all my records